Number 3. My friend and I, we both love camping and survival stuff. Being the guys that almost never get invited to parties or the fun stuff in school, even in elementary school, we were able to explore and enjoy our hobbies at very young ages. He told me that about 3 years ago, he was camping in one of our favorite locations. As a matter of fact, he was in our favorite campsite in this particular state forest when he says that he experienced something a little off-center, as he put it. I remember saying to him with a slight laugh in my voice, "What, we're not a little off-center?" He replied, more serious than I can ever recall him being.
"No, seriously bro, this would have rattled you a little bit too."
There was a pause before I replied,
"Okay, you've piqued my interest."
He went on to tell me that he had just returned to the campsite after retrieving some firewood, and it was starting to get dark. Before starting the fire, he went to take a shower in the bathhouse next to the campsite, hence why it was our favourite spot there, because we didn't have to go far to do our business or shower. He went to get some clean clothing and head in to rinse off. Well, while he was showering, he heard several thuds on the roof. He thought that maybe it was some pine cones falling from some trees, or possibly some pricks just messing around with him, so he ignored it. He reasoned to himself that it only happened 3 or 4 times, so it wasn't a big deal. After about 10 minutes, he finished up and grabbed his dirty clothing and went back to the campsite, which literally touched the bathhouse. At this point, it was pitch black out, and the only light came from the lights in and around the bathhouse and the crappy streetlights. Now, let me describe this little area real quickly. This area is forest, thick forest in many spots. When you come out of the men's side of the bathhouse, what you're greeted with is woods. The tree line starts up about 50 feet from the door. This particular batch of forest, it wasn't thick to the point of being claustrophobic, but one could easily hide if crouched and not moving. And, of course, there are several paths cut out by both humans and animals. On the other side of the bathhouse, where the woman's room is located, is a small road, which circles around this camping section, with other tiny roads and paths cutting through to get to the other side of the loop. And, of course, campsites are dotted around. There is also a lake, maybe 150 feet away from the woman's side of the bathing house. I mention that because it's important later. Anyway, he comes out of the bathroom, takes a left to get to his truck, which was maybe 50 or 60 feet away, with his tent about 10 feet away from that. He hears something in the woods off to his right. A branch snapping. Not a twig, a branch. And judging by how high off the ground it seemed, it caught his attention. He looked, but thought, or possibly hoped, it was just his imagination. He put his clothing into a laundry bag in the back seat of his truck, then went to stand outside the men's room door to see if he saw anything in the woods. Now, I'd like to point out that the ground outside the men's room also sort of dips and then comes back up to an extremely odd parking lot that hasn't been used in over 20 years. I remember being a runt and seeing the asphalt, but only barely. Now, it's not even there. It's all overgrown with grass and weeds. The old parking lot is about 100 feet from the men's room entrance, with vegetation the way I described earlier. My friend lit a cigarette and scanned the area. After 10 minutes, he had finished his cigarette, dropped it, and stomped it out. And when he looked up, he saw them. 2 sets of blood-red eyes staring directly at him. Now, I'd like to mention that John and I are kind of nuts. Very few things scare us. But this, it scared the shit out of him. He knew enough not to panic, but not to stay there too long either. He stared for a moment, trying to take in as much detail as possible. He then slowly walked to his truck and got out a small Remington shotgun that he had, the kind with no butt and a small barrel. He loaded several shells into the tube and pumped a round into the chamber. For good measure, he put an extra round in the tube, replacing the one that was now in the chamber. He then grabbed a flashlight and went around to the path that he came from while getting firewood. This particular path leads to the old parking lot I mentioned, with another, smaller one to the left. When he got to the parking lots, he looked to the right where he saw the eyes initially, and nothing. Then he looked to the left. He slowly scanned back and forth with his light and shotgun at the ready. He then heard a grunt further up the path, so he followed it. Eventually, the path ends where another path intersects, and you can go either left or right. He faced right. Nothing. Then he heard a grunt above and behind him. He turned around slowly, and there they were. He could only describe them as Bigfoot. Both of them stood about 7 or 7.5 feet tall with long, dark hair, and they smelled like shit. Now, John is not prone to panic, but he said that in this situation, when he realized that these things are real, and when he got the gut feeling that they didn't want him there, his body and mind in perfect tandem, they panicked. He fired a round of buckshot at the ground near their feet, hoping to scare them, and then he ran for his truck. He didn't bother packing his tent or his sleeping bag. All of the important stuff was either on his person or in his vehicle. He turned the engine on and sped off. As he was driving and passing the lake, he saw 3 more knelt down, drinking. He didn't even bother checking out with the park rangers, and law enforcement has never looked for him for firing his weapon. Massachusetts has strict gun and ammunition laws. Strangely enough, his name was attached to the campsite for that night and the 3 nights previous, and the rangers, they had his info. The state police could have easily tracked him down too. There was something strange going on there that night. What scared him the most though is that the place, it was crawling with campers, and no one noticed them. Honestly, I believe the guy. He wouldn't make this kind of shit up and have a serious tone about it too. It's hard to explain, but if you know someone all your life the way John and I know each other, you know when they're not bullshitting. I haven't been to this forest in years, but I sure would like to go back to see if I could have my own experience.
Number 2.
I'm 23 years old now, and when I think of this story, it sends shivers down my spine. When I was 12 years old, I had lived in very rural New York, so rural that the nearest neighbor was 20 minutes away. I lived on a farm that was not very big, but a decent size for a 3-person family. On one night, my parents were going out of town until the next day, so I was alone for a good 24 hours. I thought this would be a great time for a few friends to come over, only one of which could actually stay the night. His name was Jack. Jack had come around at 7:30 at night to stay the night at my house while we did the random crap 12-year-olds did. It was 2004, so we really had nothing to play but on our PlayStation, and we didn't have many games for it. While we were playing the PlayStation, I heard some weird scratching, and it sounded like it was coming from somewhere inside the house. I had my friend pause the game to hear where the noise was coming from. It was indeed scratching, and it was coming from the front door, which, to this day, I'm glad was locked. My friend and I, we went up to investigate. I checked outside the window closest to the front door, leaving the blinds on it a little bit shut so whoever or whatever was out there couldn't see me. But what I saw was terrifying. I swear to God, my heart, it almost stopped when I saw it. It was a humanoid creature, on all fucking 4s, scratching at my door. I'll try to describe it as best as I can. It seemed to have a kind of greenish skin, dark brown or black eyes, and a scary figure. I immediately backed away from the window. I told my friend to go upstairs and followed him up. I went into the bedroom and locked the door, and I grabbed a crappy pocket knife that can't do much damage, but I felt safer with it. The scratching, it got louder and louder, as if it was moving across the house to the side where my bedroom was. I tried to look out of my bedroom window, but I couldn't see anything down from the angle I was at. As we were sitting there, I started hearing screeching, and then I heard banging against the side of my house. I listened in terror as this thing banged and banged for what seemed like forever. Then, all of a sudden, it just stopped. I looked out the window quickly and I saw the creature run away into the forest behind my house, going into the tree line. As I was watching it running on all fours, it turned around and looked me dead in the eyes before just running off into the forest. My friend and I, we didn't get any sleep that night. And being so young, we thought about calling the police, but we reasoned against it, thinking that no one would believe us. In the morning though, I told my parents what I saw, but they said it was just our imagination. I tried objecting again and again, but they always said that it just wasn't real. When I was 19 years old, I moved out and have lived in the same house I live in now. I have since gone back to the old house that has now been demolished after my parents moved out. The land was purchased by some local people and was now being used for farming. Nothing happened on my return, but I'll never go back to that place again. My friend and I, we haven't been in contact for a long time, so I never got to reminisce the past experience with him. But I swear to you, this whole story, it's true, and it was one of the scariest nights of my entire life.